I hope you enjoyed our latest presentation. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll see you again soon.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Sherry, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Doing well. We have a thunderstorm here. And Kevin, I'd like to say a quick congratulations to all the Knicks fans who are joining us today. That was quite a victory and quite a series and very exciting.
Yes, yes. And I remembered when they won 50 years ago. I lived in New Jersey at the time, so it was like I was great, it was wonderful. But the sad part if it's another 50 years from now, I'll be 120.
Well, let's hope it's not another 50 years.
Yeah, I hope not. I can't wait that long.
Yeah, we can't wait that long. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it was very exciting. Well, congratulations, and hopefully you win in less than 50 years. And Kevin, we have a very interesting topic to talk about today that's been in the news all over Florida. So we've been talking about it quite a bit here. And let's talk about what our goal is today.
Yeah, you know what? When I heard about this claim, when I heard about this lawsuit or this theft or this story, it really bothered me because I've never seen in all the years I've been in handling community association insurance, I've never seen a systemic breakdown before where everybody just so many people were just dishonest that you wonder how they actually had an association, how they actually run an association, and apparently they did a lousy job at it. So what we're going to do is talk about the warning signs so that this doesn't happen to any association that we happen to insure or whoever's listening to this webinar. And we're talk about the importance of oversight because that was the key here. The breakdown came from a lack of oversight. And we'll talk about the tools available, but we're going to talk about insurance. What insurance protections is needed? What kind of insurance you have to have so that when the thing happens, the association will be made whole again. So that's kind of what we're talking about today. So looking forward to it. Again, we haven't talked about this kind of things before. In fact, we haven't talked about crime losses in a very long time. So this is really appropriate and a good time for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a big story, multi-million dollar fraud conspiracy, and it's a Miami Homeowners Association. I did want to take a quick second to mention that we record all of our webinars. We put them on our YouTube channel so you can listen to it there. And I'll also be sending an email out a few days after the webinar with the recording and the slides. So if you'd like to listen to it again, you can listen to it via the email that you get or on the YouTube channel. And if you have any questions about the information that we go over today, feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box at the end. So Kevin, so what exactly happened? Why was this such a huge case of fraud?
Okay, sure. On April 30th, a few months ago, right, a group of individuals from the Hammocks Homeowner Associations in the Miami area, right, were found guilty of stealing as much as $2 million from the HOA by creating shell companies.
Wow.
Okay,
Okay, $2
simple
million.
as that.
dollars.
$2 million by creating shell companies.
And this wasn't just one board member or it was actually like a group of people, correct? It was more than one.
Exactly. Here you go. You got the association president, right, who was found guilty of racketeering and grand theft charges. He has 7 years in a state prison, 7 years probation. The president also has a ban from working or soliciting funds or listening work at the Hammock Association, okay, and can't even step foot in that association ever again.
Wow,
And
incredible.
also has a ban on doing any work in any HOA.
Well, that's good. That's good
Yeah,
news.
but you know what? In all the years I've been, I've never heard of a HOA board member that's happening to, normally a property manager, everybody else can get. This is the first time I've seen a board member actually get 7 years in jail. Now, the board president was involved. The board president's spouse was involved. The husband was involved, right? Okay.
Hmm.
He got 7 years probation. He had to pay back $50,000 to the association. And he had a deed over his personal property that was worth $1.2 million.
Incredible, incredible.
Yeah.
I'm glad they were
Also, too,
caught.
he too cannot do any work or solicit work at the hammocks anymore.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's a husband and wife who
Okay.
were on the board, and she was
Okay.
the
That's
president of the board,
yep.
and
And
then
she's just a spouse. Okay.
and her spouse. And then now, how did they pull this off, Kevin? Can you
Oh,
discuss?
wait. Let's talk about the rest of them too. 8 people in
Okay,
total. 8 people. So you
okay.
had three. board member, three former board members, so three members of the board, three ladies that were on the board, right? That was on the board. One of them had to be 80 years old, involved in this scheme. Okay, um, you had a cousin of the president and the spouse, so cousin there. You had the association's accountant involved. Okay, and one person who was really involved in a lot of the shell company. Well, you had two people involved in the shell companies, but one person who wasn't a board member or anything, just a dishonest person, you know. So eight people were involved in this thing.
That's quite a bit. That's basically they took over the association. It
Yeah.
sounds like a takeover.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, you're talking about a huge association there with thousands and thousands of units in this part of Florida. So it's a huge association. But we're saying is that you had this group of people were able to really get in there, create this kind of problem for the association. The association couldn't do anything about it. So,
Hmm. It
so
was very
let's
involved with shell companies,
yeah.
etc.
So
Hmm.
okay, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about how the loss was discovered because that's we'll go through how this thing happened so that again, what our goal today is so that when you see these things happening, when you come across them, you don't ignore them. You do something about it. So you had the residents of the association was noticing that the fees were starting to go up. The association assessments would go up higher and higher. And every year they would go up not 10, 15%, but 100, 300%, 400% every year. The reserve account would drop. You see it diminishing, but they never saw any action. They never saw anything get done. They never saw the things they said they were going to do actually ever get done. So at that point in time, what the board decided to do was to take, start to, notice things and start to, get involved and wanted to make some changes and everything like that. So the first thing they found out that the board did not have a meeting, in about 4.5 years. Okay. No meeting at all. That group that handled it just secretly did everything and did it all in secret, basically.
Hmm.
There was no financial audit done for 6 out of 7 years.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. Then they said, we're taking control of it. And so what they tried to do, okay, was to have an election. They had everybody, I mean, they had hundreds of people lined up for the election, but they had to stop it because somebody called in a fake bomb threat.
Wow. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
then
they were
after that,
covering, they were trying, they were tampering with the elections as
yeah,
well.
after that, they tried another election, but the board ended up throwing out 2/3 of all the votes that ballots that were cast.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here again is these group of people that took control over this association to the point where they couldn't do anything. They recognized that there's a problem. They went and did the right thing and said, okay, we need to start some investigating. We started doing our work and realized is that, wait a minute, we're not getting any support at all. We're not, this is really creating a problem for us.
Hmm. Yeah, the homeowners were suspicious, but they really couldn't do anything. Every time they tried to do something like have an election or investigate, they were being roadblocked.
They were roadblocking. Even the president itself had an investigating people there, had their own security people that would go in and create problems for people who did complain. They would
Ah.
create lawsuits against them. So the person who ran it really just, she just really ran it. So she kept everybody at bay.
Hmm.
So this is the next thing. So now law enforcement gets involved. Okay. And when law enforcement get involved, okay, you think that things would get a little bit better. But guess
Hmm.
what happened? The president just ignored all subpoenas. Everything, every time they would put it, they would want paperwork, they want documentation, financial records, they just wouldn't
Hmm.
turn them over, you know.
Hmm.
But what make it worse is that they filed a suit to get reimbursed for the time and energy and expense of gathering the records, even though they never produced any records.
Wow. Wow. Very bold, very bold,
Yeah, yeah.
very bold. They were
And
basically pushing back against law enforcement, trying to intimidate law enforcement.
to the point where the board actually sued the criminal investigator, saying they didn't have the right to do it. They also filed a lawsuit against the judge saying that the judge didn't have the right to do it, and they appealed the judge's ruling.
Wow.
Of
Wow.
getting documentation there. And finally, the board ended up totally ignoring the judge itself and said, And what they did was went back and said the board doesn't trust the state. They're not turning over any documents.
Wow. They don't trust the state, so we don't have to comply with all these
We don't
subpoenas.
have to
We don't
comply.
have to provide records. We don't
Yeah,
have to do anything.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So this group, so again, this is 2017 and 2022. Okay. And again,
Hmm.
it finally was concluded April, like, several months ago. So,
Hmm.
so let's follow the money. So let's talk about what happened here. How did this happen? So the prosecutor said that that group there, the three, the board members, the treasurer, the board members, the accountant, the cousin, they all under that HOA, right? They netted more than $1.4 million, right? Investigators found 200 checks that was written, okay, by that homeowner association run by the husband, okay, 200
Hmm.
checks over a 5-year period. Okay. He was a sole
Hmm.
signature of those checks. Okay. Also, they found out the three other female board members were also writing checks, also sending him the money. Now, the way it worked is that they would take the shell company people. Okay. There was a couple of shell companies. They would take
Hmm.
10% of the amount and give the rest of it back to the president of the association.
Oh, okay. Okay. It was a real system that they had in place,
It's a real
an
system. So they
embezzlement
had these
system.
shell companies in there that really was able to just they would send out a bill, an invoice saying, okay, well, we did the lawn, we prepared the roof, we put the security together, okay?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they didn't do anything. In fact, they
Hmm.
found out that, when they looked at the company, the company had no employees, had no equipment, there was nothing there. I mean,
So none of the
blatant.
work, none of the work was getting done by these shell
Yeah,
companies. There was
yeah,
no work being done.
yeah.
Hmm.
You had a situation where the president again wrote $1 million worth of check, $1 million, yeah, worth of checks, right, to three companies, okay, who owned a body shop.
Hmm.
Okay, they just owned a body shop. Okay, she did work with this person one time and just money laundering, just ran money through this situation there.
Wow. Very bold. Very, very
Yeah,
bold.
yeah.
Yeah. And from the outside looking in, there were invoices, there were,
Hmm.
it looked, the books probably looked okay, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
homeowners knew something was going on. They were getting
Yeah,
more and more suspicious. So, which makes sense. I mean, nothing's getting done, no meetings, no transparency, that kind of a thing.
yeah, yeah. So in all, okay, prosecutors say they had 5 companies run by the president's husband, okay, and former board members that siphoned off that $2 million.
Wow.
Yeah,
Incredible.
yeah, yeah,
Incredible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Hmm.
That's the story. That's who these guys were. And so what we want to do is talk about how, what can they do? What can our people who listen to this webinar do to make sure that this doesn't happen? Okay. This is important. We
Absolutely.
we 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 saw this situation where you had this group of people who really took advantage of the association. And what we don't want it to happen is the people who were listening to this webinar to say, guess what? This happened to us. So So we got 5 failures there that we saw that allowed this to happen. Okay. The first one is the trust. Okay. Some way, some shape and form that the board directors, the president itself, made people believe that she was looking in the best interest of the association. Okay. Somewhere
Hmm.
along the line, she made everybody believe. And as they believed it, guess what? They took their eye off the ball.
Right, right. There was nobody was checking anything. They just
Yeah.
put all their trust in the
Yeah, they put
president.
all the trust in there. And
Hmm.
again, I mean, think about a lot of community associations out there do that. I mean, that
Yeah,
is the
they
number one
do.
problem you talk about. Yeah.
It's very common.
Because again, why do they do that? Because guess what? They don't attend board meetings, right? When they say
Hmm.
who's going to be a board member, they run. Nobody says, I want to be a board member to help make this association better.
Hmm.
So you have boards of directors there who, when they are the treasurer, when they are the president, when they invite whatever the position is, they just people walk away from them. People
Hmm.
don't have the proper verification to
Right.
to, to,
They're not
to
involved. They're not
they're
really
not involved
involved.
enough. They're not involved in
with the
that.
budget or any kind of checks and balances kind of situation, they just hand it over to the board and let them do it.
Mhm. And that's the key. No involvement at all. Which means second thing is too much control in too few hands. Okay. Again, you have that many units in that one and that many in that HOA there, and everything's run by 5 or 6 people. Okay. And they have total control. You talk about
Right.
financial control. You talk about the control where you should have somebody, some oversight. And that's the key word I said in the beginning. There should be some oversight there, but it wasn't. They trusted the people so much, had little oversight, so all the control was in the hands of 4 or 5 people.
Which is
The
was
next thing,
the big mistake
yeah,
that they made.
weak vendor and payment control. Weak vendor and payment control, meaning that
Hmm.
when you have vendors out there, you have to do your due diligence. Okay. You have to have no conflict of interest there, you know, meaning that if I'm using a vendor and he's related to me, I have to disclose it,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and then even after I do it, you've got to have some kind of controls over the payment. What kind of controls you have over it? So they had weak vendor, controls and payment controls that allowed these people to get away with it to the point of millions of dollars, millions
Hmm.
of dollars. Okay.
Hmm.
Lack of independent oversight. I mean, that is a big one. When you have an association this big, you got to have independent oversight. Independent oversight means it can't just be the 5 people who are on the board have oversight of each other. Somebody on the outside has to be able to come in. And normally it's an independent auditor that comes in and looks at the financials, especially an association that large with so much money in there. You
Hmm.
have to have it.
Hmm.
And then the warning signs were there years before, and they just did nothing about it. They waited to the point in time where, can you imagine, they didn't have audit financials for 6 years. They had board meetings. They didn't have public meetings for 4 or 5 years. So you got to the point where you had this group of people just sitting there, just robbing them blind.
Hmm. That's really sad that they didn't even realize, after year two, and there had been no budget meetings, no open meetings amongst the association, the homeowners, et cetera. They really had no idea what was going on. They were
Yeah.
just kind of,
Mhm.
they basically turned a blind eye to what the board was doing. And, it's just amazing that it went on for that long. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But what's interesting is that there's always that one thing that gets people to pay attention. And that is, I
Hmm.
got to pay more money.
Yeah, when the
You
when
know?
the association fees are
Yeah.
going up and the
Yeah.
work is not being done on the
Yeah.
pool or
Yeah.
things that need to be fixed, there was red flags were popping up
Yeah. Yeah.
along the way. No work
Yeah.
getting done, but all of a
Yeah.
sudden we're paying double in our
Yeah.
fee. Our fees are getting doubled.
Yeah. But that's why it's so important when we talk about how association can reduce risk. Because if you realize how they reduce risk, then you at a point in time where you go, okay, you know, we can't wait until the fact that we lost so much money, or we're looking at no reserve account anymore, or a lower reserve account, and our assessments keep going up 300%. And before we do something, we want to know that you have these at least 5 things that's going on. Number one, separate financial duties. No one person controls everything. You can't have the same person who doing the deposits, doing the reconciliation of checks. You got to have separation of duties. You have separation of duties. Somebody is overseeing somebody else. However, again, if you have 5 board members all dishonest, number one is kind of kind of tough, which is why number two is so important. Require independent reviews. You gotta have an outsider. You gotta have somebody else in there who's going to oversee the whole situation. Um, because again, I mean, some situation like that, you know, you need somebody from the outside. You have that independent financial audit, especially if you are such a large association. Next one, you have to have vendor controls and enforce them. Every association has a manual that says this is what we do when we deal with vendors. We got to make sure they're licensed. We got to make sure they're bonded. We have to make sure they're recommended. We got to make sure these 4 or 5 things they have to do, but you got to follow them. If you don't follow them and you don't have, again, independent, reviews to make sure that things getting done, it gets lax. And then you find somebody who, a used car salesman and say, guess what? We're going to start sending you bills because we'll say you are a landscaper and we'll give you 10%. So you're talking a million,
Exactly.
that person could have ended up, if you're talking $1 million worth of checks, that person could end up $100,000 doing nothing more than just, say, yes, I came by and cut the grass every week.
Absolutely. And if they're only getting one bid to you, Kevin, from one vendor, or somebody says their cousin has a, roofing company or a landscaping company, that kind of a thing, those are red flags as well.
Exactly. Which why the next one is we talk about demanding transparency. You got to have transparency. You can't have no board meeting for 5 or 6 years. You got to be open. You have to say, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. You have to demand that we're seeing all the information. Okay. And you can't wait till it's
Hmm
too late because when it's too late there, guess what happens? You have a bomb threat that says, guess what? You can't vote today. Or people throw out and you can't do anything, but guess what? Call the police. And we don't want to get into a
Yeah,
situation where it's your last course of action calling the police. We want you to
right,
be
right.
ready. And the way to be ready is to have these little things that we're talking about. Yeah.
hmm
That,
Absolutely.
that, at least that last one is disclose conflict of interest. Okay. You have to let people know that guess what? There's a conflict here. I picked this person as my landscaper or my roofer. I'm related to them, but guess what? I got 3 bids. They gave the best bid. Let's go with them. I'm fully transparent. I'm letting you know my conflicts of interest up front. That way,
hmm
I'm not saying you can't have relatives and friends do the work, but you're going to have to make sure that you disclose that information.
hmm
What do you think? Good?
Yeah. There
Okay.
should be more transparency, what the best bids are, et cetera, and what, like you said, what the relationships are with the vendors, that kind of a thing.
Mhm.
Just have more
Eh,
information, stay on top of it.
yes,
hmm
it's trust but verify. Back to where well, who said that?
hmm
Reagan said that years ago. Um, you
hmm
know, well, trust without verification is nothing. That's what happened here. There's trust out there, and everybody believed the next door neighbor was the one going to oversee everything, and nobody did.
Right, right. Yeah, I can think that, one of the big lessons is be involved, get involved with your association. If you are a homeowner, just get involved and ask questions and make sure all of this is being done,
And
because it
ask
is your
questions
money. At the end of the
before
day, it's your money. Hmm
it's your money. Yeah, and ask questions before it's too late. You get to a point where you go, I should have asked that question. That's when it's too late.
Right, right. It shouldn't get to the point where, the police have to come in and arrest everybody and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
hmm
yeah,
Lawyers, and it just is
yeah.
so expensive. And then the money's gone at that point too. Hmm
All right, let's talk about insurance. Insurance. Now, whenever a HOA has a problem, there's a loss happens out there. The first thing they do is go to their package policy. They go to their liability and property policy. Okay. And the first thing you have to understand when we're talking about a theft of funds, okay, the property policy does not cover money, doesn't cover.
Right.
They cover, things like fire, wind, losses of physical
Yeah.
loss.
Just the
There's no
structures, just the,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. They don't cover money. So, if you have a package policy and you think that you're going to go out there and go, okay, well, let me put it in, and the GL policy, because again, we're talking about two separate things here. We're
Right.
talking about the board members that stole money, but now you're talking about all the lawsuits that are involved there. Okay. All those lawyer, all the, there's a lot of lawyers going to be involved in the thing because you got the innocent board members, you got the guilty
hmm
board members. So, there's a lot of money being spent. So will a
hmm
GL policy pick up those lawsuits? And the answer is no, because it's not bodily injury, property damage, or personal injury.
Right, right. Oh yeah, that's an interesting point you just brought up, Kevin, which is that not all the board members were involved in this, right? There was a handful of board members, but there were a couple of board members that were not involved, but they were there. You think they would have seen something or been suspicious, you know what I mean?
That's what goes to the next thing we're talking about. Okay, so we're
Yeah.
talking about now, the general liability, property, nothing there. Now we're talking about the D&O policy. At the end of the day, there are going to be two policies that can be really important. Number one is the D&O policy. The D&O policy is really important because, again, now all of a sudden you got everybody's being sued because of loss of money. You got the innocent people being sued, the guilty people being sued. Everybody is going to be sued somewhere along the line. Because when money is missing, there's somebody has to take responsibility for it. You know, you
Hmm.
may have that new board in there, who may go after the old board because they, allowed this thing to happen that were innocent. But the
Hmm.
guilty people, guess what have to happen? When you look at the D&O policy exclusions, there are three exclusions in there that are really important. There's fraud, there's illegal profit, and intentional misconduct.
Hmm.
Okay. A lot of those things is in there, but guess what? We can't say you are the person that is guilty. A judge has to say that.
Right, right, right.
The
They do
judge has
have
to say
breach of fiduciary duty, which, the innocent board members still had a fiduciary duty to protect the association so that they could be in trouble for that,
but Sherry, you missed the most important part. They all are innocent until proven guilty.
until proven guilty. You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's
so what
true.
it is that the D&O policy has what's called final adjudication wording in there. That there's defense costs until final adjudication. Okay. That's the
Hmm.
important thing. So what happens now, you have a lot of lawsuits going to be coming out of this thing. Okay. A
Hmm.
lot of lawsuits probably already exist. I don't know. I mean, I don't know about it. But again, there is a problem out there right now in that association. You have 1,000 people who live there, and the board failed to take care. Talking about, you said the word breach their fiduciary duty. They did breach their fiduciary duty. They did it. And as a result of that, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to start seeing D&O claims across the board against everybody. The,
Hmm.
the guilty ones, the innocent ones, um, the spouse. It's kind of interesting. Look at who. So we're talking about 8 individuals. So we're talking about the board. There's 4 board members, 3 plus the president. The spouse, okay, the spousal
Hmm.
coverage under your D&O. So the spouse may have some coverage there. Okay. Now the
Hmm.
cousin doesn't have coverage. So the cousin doesn't have coverage. The vendor doesn't have coverage, and the accountant doesn't have coverage. So out of 8 people, there's 3 that I can see the D&O policy has some limitations there. But again, the insurance is not there to say we can't provide coverage for you. There's final adjudication wordings. That's the important thing on the D&O policy.
Hmm. Hmm. Whichever, it's
Okay.
going to be a lot of claims
Yes.
at the end of the day, lots of people that are covered and
So,
lawsuits.
so let's talk about the coverage they should have. They should have a crime insurance policy. A crime insurance policy that picks up the theft for fraudulent and dishonest acts. Here's the key thing. Is the insured acting alone or in collusion with others? That's the key coverage there. So it
Hmm.
involves multiple parties. So it's not like if the person is not just covering the president and the other board members, it covers also the people they're involved in, the other people we're involved in, as long as the policy picks up non-compensated board members. Okay,
Hmm.
that's important because if you have a policy out there, a crime policy that protects only employees of the association, there may not be any coverage under this policy.
That's very important. Very, very
Yes.
important.
Yes.
You want to make sure the board members are covered.
Yes, make sure the board members, because again, when we talk about employee dishonesty or crime coverage, you're talking about employee theft coverage. That means you have
Hmm.
to be paid, compensated by wages, salary, commission. If you're
Right.
not compensated by wages, salary, and commission, are you an employee under the policy? Got to
Hmm.
make sure that you are an employee under the policy. And
Absolutely.
the one thing too, you got to make sure you have adequate limit.
Hmm.
Okay. In this situation right there, does the association have an adequate limit? Now, what is an adequate limit? by by most laws, okay, and public policy says you should have 3 months assessments plus the reserve.
Hmm.
Okay. That's the standard in the industry. The lending institutions want it, state laws want it. It is just one of the things that are standard. Now, if they had a policy that 3 months assessments plus reserve, guess what? They would have enough money there to pay for their, $2 or $3 million, their $2 million loss because the reserve account was probably over, several millions of
Hmm.
dollars.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we also have to be worried about computer theft, transfer fraud, and social engineering. It never came up in a situation right there, but it easily could have happened there also. And I don't even know if it didn't happen, if it happened or not. We haven't gotten, I haven't seen anything about it. But again, when you're talking about the insurance coverage that's necessary here is the crime policy and the D&O. Those are two policies that are really important in a situation like this. And you got to make sure you have the right limits. You got to make sure that the non-compensated board members are covered. The policy is acting alone, inclusion of others, so you're okay with that, but you're in pretty good shape.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the fact that, a lot of board members who may not know a lot about insurance are thinking, well, we have insurance, we have a package policy, you know, or we have D&O, but they might not have crime, that kind of a thing, should really be aware of why crime policies are so important and what the distinction is between the two and how the coverage is totally different.
Okay, so what did we learn? Key takeaways. Number one, when we talk about fraud, it's usually the result of multiple systemic failures there. Okay. Especially in HOAs, condos, we'll see the manager and a treasurer, we'll see people get involved and they connect to create a loss. And it happens over a period of time. It doesn't happen right off the bat. It takes time for it to grow and develop. So it's a systemic failure. So what you have to do is have strong governance, that first line of defense. You have to have oversight. Oversight is that key word. You have to make people believe that you care, believe that this matters to you. Because if you don't believe it matters to you, guess what? That's what happens when a situation like what happened to Hammocks. They felt that they were above the law. They felt that it didn't matter because nobody cared about them. And the third thing is make sure you have the right insurance. Don't go to your package policy and think you're going to have coverage. Now, again, you could have crime in your package policy. But if you do have crime in your package policy, you got to make sure the things we talked about are covered. But don't look at your property and your liability thinking that you're going to be covered when that lawsuit hits you, or when that money is missing. So, that's our takeaways.
Hmm. Speak to your broker. Yeah, speak to the broker
Yes,
about it.
exactly.
Absolutely. Great. Well, that's a lot of great information, Kevin, regarding coverage, insurance coverage, what to be aware of, how they were able to pull off such a big crime, for so long. Really apathy, not caring, not really getting involved with the association with what the checks and balances were, if there was any oversight, that kind of a thing.